Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us here on KXAN Live. I'm Will Dupree. We appreciate you joining us on this beautiful Friday afternoon here in Austin. And we want to start our conversation today about Proposition B and the successful campaign to reinstate Austin's public camping ban. So just a week ago tomorrow, voters approved this initiative. And it proved to be one of the most divisive elections in our city's history. The group that pushed for approval, Save Austin Now, raised a record amount of money and mobilized people in ways not seen before. Last night, our investigative reporter Kevin Clark looked into this successful effort in a special report. He is joining me now alongside an LBJ School of Public Affairs professor, Don Kettle. Kevin and Don, thank you so much for being here to continue our conversation.
Of course.
Great to be with you.
All right, well, Kevin, I want you to start things off because a lot of people are wondering when these various parts of Prop B will go into effect and how the city plans to implement all of them. What's the latest update?
Well, after the election, that is the primary concern. We've heard a lot from viewers about exactly that. How will it be implemented? What happens come Tuesday? What we know so far is that City Manager Spencer Cronk has told the City Council at Thursday's meeting that it will be more of a phased approach. So you may not see a whole lot of activity on that specific Tuesday, but we know that City Manager Spencer Cronk is working with APD to try and come up with some kind of plan that will be based first in education, and enforcement with any citations would be a very last resort measure. But we are speaking with several of the homeless service providers that are usually involved in these kind of efforts. They're going to be part of the outreach, and we'll continue to report more on that as we're heading into Tuesday. But Will, like you mentioned, we're bringing in Don Kettle. He is an LBJ School of Public Affairs professor. He specializes in public management and public policy. Don, we last spoke before the election, and since then the results are in. 57% of Austin voters approved Proposition B. What are your initial thoughts on that?
Well, the first thing is that there was early talk that this was going to be very, very close, and of course it turned out not to be. The second point that's worth noting is that it's pretty clear that some people voted in favor of Prop B because they thought it was the best way to try to help those experiencing homelessness. Other people voted exactly the opposite way, but for the same reason. So now the challenge is trying to figure out, now that the camping ban is in place, what are we going to do? And then the third thing that's worth paying attention to in particular is that there's always the possibility of action in the courts to try to stop this. Those efforts have been successful in other states, and so the possibility of a judicial moratorium is at least lurking out there in the grounds that you can't force people to move unless they have someplace to move to.
Don, can you extrapolate on that? I'd be interested in hearing more about those judicial moratoriums in other places.
Yeah, there have been a couple of cases that have been argued already that have in fact led to that conclusion. And the underlying issue is this. It's one thing to say that you want to try to deal with the question of homelessness by removing people from the streets. But the argument that was made, it was made successfully, is that you can't do that if you don't have someplace for people to move to, that you can't impose a kind of a burden or a cost on individuals unless you have some remedy. And so the question now is that are the people who are waiting to challenge this as soon as it goes into effect in the courts, what are the odds that they might win? What would that do to the overall strategy? No matter what, though, all roads lead to the basic problem that to be able to deal with the problem of homelessness in Austin, we need more homes and more housing, and simply moving campgrounds from one place to another is just not going to solve the problem.
Don, you talked about how the margin for voting was bigger than you thought it was going to be, than we thought it was going to be. We thought it was going to be closer than it was. Why do you think that is? Do you think it is a product of the, as you're looking at the numbers here, the campaign that Save Austin ran to raise money, or do you think it's a product of voters being especially impassioned about this issue, or a little bit of everything?
I think it's a little bit of everything, beginning with the fact that there was a lot of effort made by Save Austin Now to get the vote out. There was also the challenge that the weather that day was really bizarre with the forecast of heavy thunderstorms, so it might have favored people more likely to vote by hopping in their car and going someplace who had more flexibility. There's no doubt on top of that that what we have seen is an enormous mobilization of the Austin public and a growing concern that this was a problem that somehow we need to find a way to solve. But the important thing about Prop B is that all it does is to elevate the importance. It doesn't solve the problem. And so now we're moving into phase two of what's likely to be a very long-term and frankly, very difficult issue.
Don, a lot of people had different reasons for voting for Prop B. Is that what you noticed? And what were some of those reasons and the emotion behind their vote?
First of all, the emotion is very, very high. There are lots of people who are incredibly concerned both about what may be happening in their neighborhood, about what the implications of the growing problems of homelessness throughout Austin may be going. It is just challenging to all of us to drive underneath I-35 and to see campgrounds. People are wondering what that's going to mean ultimately for the nature of the city. And it, at its core is just it's a huge, enormous social challenge that large numbers of people thought we needed to do something with. But then that's where the consensus broke down. Should we, on the one hand, not criminalize being homeless by not creating a situation where people would be fined or possibly ticketed for camping out in public? Should, on the other hand, we either try to force the city's hand by creating an ordinance, by creating a change in the city charter that would force the city's hand and try to create action? There are a lot of people who voted in favor of the Prop B proposal precisely that reason, because they thought it would turn up the heat. And then there are other people who just thought that the basic problem here is that we've got too much of sets of big city issues and people just simply trying to sweep it away. There are so many different ideas and proposals that it's really hard to sort all that out. But now we're on to phase two.
Having spoken to co-founders of Save Austin now, Don, they say they're planning on being involved in other issues related to affordability and public safety in the city. You mentioned that when we first talked that when these movements begin, they rarely go away, at least completely. Why do you think that is? And what does that say about Save Austin now?
Yeah, I think that that's an important piece because even, and follow up to your story, that there was a lot of traffic on tweet picking up on that argument in particular as a way of signaling that Save Austin now just doesn't intend to disappear. And the fact is now there's a group that's organized. They have a mailing list. They have succeeded in raising money. They've got contacts. They know who they can rely on. So it's so much easier to mobilize in the next issue, which could be either where subsidized housing may go, issues of growth and development. We've got major transportation challenges, as well as just fundamental questions about things ranging from the convention center on the one hand to what the mass transit issue is going to be in the future as we begin building a rail line throughout the city. There's just a universe of different issues that the people who allied themselves on the issue of homelessness will probably find themselves in alliance on other kinds of problems as well.
And you noted before it wasn't just a red versus blue issue, right? People had a lot of different reasons.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's fascinating about this. There were large numbers of people who were, in fact, Democrats who voted in favor of Prop B, saying, you know what, we've just got to force the city's hand. It's been 2 years and nothing's happened, so I'm going to vote for the proposition because that's going to force the city to act. The people who felt just as strongly on the other side saying, you know what, I just don't want to criminalize homelessness, so I'm not going to vote in favor of it. People who had very similar points of view, and I've talked to folks who said, you know, I know what I think about what we ought to do, but I'm not sure which way to vote. And I think that itself, because the way in which the proposition was framed, affected the way in which the voting came out. And that's, on the one hand, going to make it that much harder for city officials to figure out which strategy is the best way forward, but also sets the stage for lots more debate as this issue continues to ripen in the days and the months and years probably ahead.
Question for you, Kevin, as well, just to interject in the conversation. What has been your experience in the people who are currently experiencing homelessness? What is their reaction to this? I know that there was a man featured in your story that you spoke to.
I think there's concern, there's anxiety. That gentleman who was in our story who kind of came up while we were doing that interview with Otto Swingler, who voted for Prop B, he was rather concerned, and we actually kind of had a conversation on the spot, him basically saying, you know, where am I going to go? And we actually asked him repeatedly, if this passed, where would you go? And he honestly didn't have an answer. So I'm sure it represents a lot of anxiety from individuals. I think they sensed that this was coming. Just you kind of feel a lot of concern from the individuals out on Cesar Chavez, under the overpasses, just because of the sheer unknown of what might be happening. Don, if I can, I wanted to read a couple of social media posts that we had gotten from people since the story ran. And we had talked about the money that Save Austin Now raised. It raised more than $1.7 million. For perspective, and we talked about this in the story, that $1 billion transit bond known as Project Connect, the Mobility for All PAC raised $1.3 million. So this was even a greater effort in terms of raising money than that. But one individual says, look, KXAN, nobody or no organization influenced my vote. In fact, I didn't like the people running Save Austin Now. It was my dislike of the homeless camping wherever they pleased. Totally unacceptable. Don't like seeing our streets, parks, and creeks trashed by somebody. So you hear it right there. A lot of individuals who may not be so political, may not be so partisan on one side or the other, really being personally affected by an issue in their neighborhoods. And that's kind of what this all came down to, right? I
think that's right, because I doubt that there's anybody who was even thinking about voting who didn't have a pretty strong idea about the nature of the problem and what they thought ought to be done about it, because it's the kind of thing that for anybody who travels throughout Austin, it's an issue and a challenge that they see. The issue now is going to be what we do about it, but the bigger and important background issue is that it's not certainly the case that people had their votes bought by the campaigning that was happening, but two important things happened. One was that Save Austin Now organized themselves and then organized the community to get this onto the ballot to begin with, and that's a sign of the power about the way in which issues can be framed, brought forward, and then resolved at the polls. The second thing is that the amount of publicity that surrounded this undoubtedly increased turnout as well. So that even if people may not have been directly affected by the campaign per se, they were certainly shaped by the way in which the campaign got the issue on the ballot, and then it really escalated community concern about an issue that in some ways needed no more brush to add to the fire, because it's such a huge and important issue.
On the other side, Don, just looking at some of these other comments, and we know that Homes Not Handcuffs, who was opposing bringing back the camping ban, they raised about $200,000, I believe, just shy of that. Here's an individual who may or may not have voted against B. You can surmise that they may not have, but this person goes, this is disgusting what they are doing to homeless people. Homeless men and women are people too. Can you kind of touch on that side, what those folks were concerned about? And then you also have folks who voted for Prop B saying, hey, I'm not anti-homeless at all.
Right, exactly. And there, on the first ground, there really is the concern that creating the new change to the city rules and regulations could essentially criminalize homelessness. And so people who may be camping in areas where it's not allowed would get citations, would get fines. They may not be able to pay those fines. They may be then subject to criminal court action. And there's some government programs and even future opportunities for employment that would exclude people with criminal records. And so there's a concern there that if we pursue this and pursue this aggressively, we may make it impossible for people to ever escape the challenges of homelessness, because it may make it more difficult for them to get jobs. The underlying problem now is essentially this question about what exactly we're going to do. So having now put the issue on the agenda and forcing action, the question is, what is that action going to be?
Don, one more question from me. What do you think becomes of Save Austin Now after this effort?
I think there's a pair of important efforts going on out there. One is that Save Austin Now is clearly strong and organized. It's got a group of community leaders who have been active in these issues for a long time. They are surely going to feel empowered and are surely going to be not only trying to use the muscle on this issue, but on other issues that are certain to come up as well. With Austin growing as quickly as it is right now, there are going to be just one thing after another that's going to get onto the public stage, and we now have an organization that's equipped to try to weigh in and perhaps even force community balance on some of those issues as well. So it could change the policy and the substance. But the other thing, though, is that we have the summit, which quietly was about doing its work, anticipating that one way or another the city was going to have to act. And the summit has a multi-year game plan that I think really deserves a lot of careful study and attention. There's tremendous opportunity there. And so as we begin to think about what it is we need to do we have some options not only in the short term for housing, but in the longer term for trying to build a system that's going to help successfully address that problem here in our community.
And as individuals on both sides of the vote told us, they do care about getting people out of tents and into housing. I think some people just, strong views about what's happening to parks, to public spaces, to the Austin they feel that they used to know. But Don Kettle speaking with us from the LBJ School of Public Policy. Don, we really appreciate your insight on what was an extremely divisive election.
It's so good to be with you for this conversation.
All right, thank you, Don, and thank you to our investigative reporter, Kevin Clark, for joining us for this conversation this afternoon. I will say you can view Kevin's story, read it in full, and watch the video portion of it over on our website. That's kxan.com. So, Kevin, thank you for being here, too.
Thank you so much, Will, and thank you, Don, for joining us as well. And we'll see how this issue evolves and look forward to talking with you more.
All right, everybody, thank you all for watching. We'll see you back here at another time. Please, everyone, stay safe and healthy out there, and take care.